Good evening, everybody. This is Tim Hitchcock with Hey Hitchcock here on WBMC in McMinnville, Tennessee. Thanks for joining us. We have for our guest for this show, Tracy Puckett. Tracy is a employee of the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and she has had several positions over her many years working with the Department of Agriculture. Tracy, thank you so much for coming all the way from Livingston down to do the show for us.
Thank you for having me.
Can you give us a little bit of background? You know, where are you from? Where were you educated? How did you get involved with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture?
So I am from Livingston, Tennessee. I grew up there. We have a family farm. I grew up on a tobacco and cattle and hog farm, and had tobacco well into college. And I guess that's how my parents paid off the farm. My parents also worked. My dad was a TWRA officer.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. And my mom's a school teacher.
I bet your dad's got some stories,
He has got some seriously real stories.
We may have to get him down because I've tried to get somebody from TWRA and they don't seem to get back to me for some reason. I don't know.
They're so elusive. I don't know. But he could tell you some good stories. And then I went to school at Montlow. I played high school basketball and got a scholarship at Montlow State in Tullahoma. Went there for 2 years.
Oh, you got a scholarship in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you.
And then I finished up with another scholarship at Berry College in Rome, Georgia.
Okay.
It's a private liberal arts school. But I got a horticulture degree from there.
Do you ever tell people, I went to college in Rome, and you just leave off the Georgia part?
I do until they ask me, Rome, really? You went there all the way across the world? Blah, blah, blah.
Well, that's, what a lot of people don't realize, some people that have listened to the show, but I was born outside of Paris, France.
Really?
Yeah, down at Faulkner Springs Hospital. That's outside of Paris, France.
Yeah. But, and then I went to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville to get my graduate degree.
Okay. And in previous conversations, at one point in time, you ran a garden center down in Atlanta. Was that?
I did. I ran Hastings Nature and Garden Center. It was in Buckhead. I think it's completely out of business now. And the original Hastings owner, it dated back to the 1870s.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. We had Bill Boyd in here, last week, and he was talking about how his great-great-grandfather in the 1870s started the nursery business in this area.
I think they started more in the seed business in Atlanta, and then it morphed into the garden center and landscaping.
Okay.
And, of course, they're in Buckhead, so they catered to the Buckhead crowd.
Right.
Yeah. And so I ran that.
Now, what is the Buckhead crowd? That's the hoity-toities?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We used to laugh. We would load a crate myrtle or a Japanese maple into a, BMW that a woman was coming by in the middle of the day to pick up to go home to plant. Yeah.
That's kind of like we were at a trade show over in North Carolina, and our decorated amaryllis bulbs, we do a lot of them with glitter, and we put them in a little plastic bag. And this lady owned a garden center, and she was asking about them, and I said, well, they're really pretty, but they're kind of messy. They're hard to clean up after. And she said, oh, honey, none of my customers clean their own homes. They got somebody else that'll worry about that. So that's the kind of clientele you had in Buckhead.
Yes. And so I did everything at that garden center. I hired employees. I bought all the plants for the garden center. The landscape division was kind of a separate business. We did the seminars. We did the shows. We were open 7 days a week, all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably learned so much there coming out of college and working in that setting.
And how long did that last for you?
About 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just come out of, now you were working there part-time while in college and morphed into full-time, or you just went after college full-time?
It was full-time a couple of years after I got my graduate degree. I worked there, and then I decided I wanted to move home and be closer to my parents. They both had started to retire then at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, at what point did you decide, or did the offers come, or opening, or you decide to check into the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, working for the Tennessee Department of Agriculture?
I didn't even know there was a plant division in the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. And so somebody had suggested, Tracy, you need to get online, look at it, and apply. And so I did, and there was an opening. It just happened to be in McMinnville. I hadn't moved home very long. There was an opening. And this is a crazy story.
We love crazy stories here.
Okay, so this is a crazy story. So I applied, and I had to go to Nashville for the interview. And Jim Eisler, the previous supervisor.
Mm-hmm. And Jim lives in Warren County.
Yes, Jim lives in Warren County. And Gray Hahn, the previous director. Steve Powell, the previous entomologist, was all there to interview me. And my mother rode with me, and she's sitting out front, and she's just reading a book. And so I was in the interview. There was a really bad storm that came through Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
So bad that a tree next to the building was struck by lightning and caught on fire.
Oh, wow.
And so everybody kind of ran to look at the tree on fire. And so we all got back and we sat down, and we were all looking at each other, and nobody said anything. And I said, well, that's a sign from God that you all are supposed to hire me. And they all just laughed. And then I thought, well, okay. And so, but sure enough, 2 days later, Gray called me. So
okay, we'll talk a little bit about that when we come back. We need to break for a commercial. This is Tim Hitchcock with Hey Hitchcock. We'll be back in just a few minutes with Tracy Puckett from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. We're back. This is Tim Hitchcock with Hey Hitchcock. We're here with Tracy Puckett from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. She was just telling us before the commercial break about the sign from heaven that the Tennessee Department of Agriculture was supposed to hire her by striking a tree, lightning striking a tree just outside the office where she was being interviewed. Go ahead and finish up the story.
Well, we came back in, and I told him that. I mean, I don't think anybody knew what to say when the tree was on fire. I mean, it was the craziest thing ever. And we all came back in and sat down, and here I am with these three men, and they're all just kind of staring at each other. And then I made the comment, I said, well, that's a sign from God. Y'all are supposed to hire me. And Jim laughed the hardest, I think. And he was from Georgia. I don't know if anybody knew that or not. And
okay.
He knew the place that I used to work at in Atlanta. Was very familiar with it.
Oh, okay.
Been there many times when he was visiting his family. And so for him, he just felt very, I think, comfortable with what he knew that I was capable of doing. There
was a connection there that he could really relate to.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, let me back up a little bit. Did it scare the bejeebies out of your mom when the lightning struck the tree?
She did. She said she never moved off the bench. She said all these state workers came and flooded to look. And I said, Mom, did you ever get up? She said, I never moved. I thought they would tell me if the building was on fire, and we would all leave together. And I said, you never moved? She goes, I never moved. I never moved off the bench. I was like, okay. Oh, me. That was. I'll never forget that. As long as I live.
Yeah, I bet. I don't think I would forget that. When I was in summer camp, I had done a flip on the trampoline and broke my heel, and it was Camp High Lake in White County, and I had these aluminum crutches, and I was going from one building to the other, and it came up a thunderstorm, and lightning struck twice within about 30, 40 feet of me. And I finally looked at these aluminum crutches and just threw them in the woods and started running with the broken heel. I didn't know if they had anything to do with it or not. So you started your Tennessee Department of Agriculture career here in Warren County. What were your responsibilities at that point in time?
So at that time, we mostly did, we still do, but our concentration was inspecting nursery stock for shipments leaving the country or going to other states.
And you've been to my place on numerous occasions to do Fidos back when we
Yes.
Did a lot of shipping into Canada.
Yes. We do growing season inspections. We do greenhouses and nurseries. Greenhouses are twice a year. Nurseries are during the summer. We do trapping. We do sampling. We have more now, I think.
Now, when you say we do trapping, explain what kind of trapping you do. Are we talking squirrels and coyotes and possums, or what are we talking about?
We actually do not trap any of those things. We're trapping insects to see. Sometimes you're trapping to see if an insect is in the area. So negative data of something not being here is just as valuable to researchers or USDA or whomever it is as it is to find something. And of course, we don't want to find certain things.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's things now we absolutely do not want in Warren County.
Right.
So trapping is usually for insects, moths. We could even be doing. Sometimes we've done Japanese beetle trapping to try and get Japanese beetles, so that people can take them to rear out the larvae because they need them for research. I mean, we've done trapping for.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we've done trapping for so many different projects, not just for us. Sometimes. Yeah.
Okay.
We send stuff to other parts of the country, depending on what we're asked, to do. So right now, I was working today and I was going through an email, and we are asked to find a scale that we're not sure even is around here at all, that none of us have ever seen, send to Italy.
Is this something that you stand on to get your weight? Explain a lot of people don't know what you're talking about when you say scale.
Oh, I'm sorry. Scale is usually it's a little white insect that attaches to the limb of a tree, a leaf, whatever, and it sucks the tree or the plant. They usually don't crawl very far, and they usually have a waxy coating over it. Japanese maple scale is one of our hardest ones, in the area for nurserymen to eliminate. It occurs here naturally, but when you start sending plant material to Missouri and Kansas and places like that, they don't think they have any of it, so they don't want it from us either. So,
but they probably do.
They probably do.
Just,
yes.
Yeah, want to make things more complicated on us.
Yeah.
So now, what is the remedy for scale? If somebody has scale, what would they treat that with?
There's a lot of different. An insect growth regulator targeted with dormant oils work really well for scales, and spraying when the leaves are off the plants. That's probably the best time. It's hard for the nurserymen right now because it's basically shipping season here in McMinnville.
Oh, absolutely.
As you know, you're a nurseryman. And so right now, starting in February, starting in January, they start shipping south, and then we'll start shipping middle of the country, and then we'll go north. And so they start digging in the fall, digging hard, digging heavy every day they can, and so they're shipping. And so it's hard to get some sprays on plants at this time of the year. But if you can get them on, especially if you have scales, it'll really knock them down, kill them. Yeah, control them.
We don't have the maple trees or any big stuff like that, but I have like black mondo grass. We grow windmill palms. We grow a chorus ogon, another grass, and scale will get on that, and we keep it sprayed with neem oil.
And you're spraying in a greenhouse setting.
Spraying in a greenhouse setting, so we don't have to worry about it washing off right after it's been sprayed on.
So going back, we trap for insects for tons of different reasons, and then we take samples. So we take plant material samples to test for diseases, or to see if the presence of diseases, or we take samples for compliance agreements so that our shippers, our nurserymen, can actually ship to other states, and we tell those states, no, they did not have boxwood blight. We tested and sampled them, and they now have a compliance agreement to do that. So we do a lot more of that than we probably did when Jim was here, Mr. Eisler, but it's just how it's set up now, how it works between states.
I know it at one time, and probably still does. It just doesn't apply to me as much, but we would get emails or calls wanting us to donate a few plants for the research station so they could do testing on. I don't know if they were testing, what they were testing for, but they would look for plants, nurserymen to donate a handful of plants just to do testing on with insects or whatever. I'm not sure.
I think, I don't think, I know now the research center is almost kind of self-sufficient in a way. What I mean by that is I was talking with the new director just the other day, and they are getting so many grants to do the research and the work out there that they're doing. And it's grants for just a lot of stuff. It's not any one thing in particular.
Right.
They're still doing work on IFA. They're still doing work on Japanese beetle.
What is IFA?
Oh, sorry, IFA. I put out all these acronyms just like everybody's supposed to know.
That's my job, is to realize they don't know what IFA is. Ask Tracy what IFA is.
The imported fire ant.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And so they're still doing work on even things that have been here for a while. Mm-hmm. We're still doing research and work because there's always something to be done. But the research center, the reason they're probably not asking for plant material, and sometimes they'll ask for trees, but they really want trees that have been, they have Japanese maple scale on them, or they want trees that has something already on them.
Okay.
But they're able to now really purchase a lot of that material from the growers, where probably 20 years ago, they were asking for donations because they weren't as self-sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's get back to fire ants. Now, how far, I haven't looked at a fire ant map in years, but how far north have they gotten?
So the fire ant line in Tennessee, for most of the entire state, in Middle Tennessee, it goes all the way to the Kentucky line.
Right.
There are 3 counties in West Tennessee, Dyer, Lake, and whatever's right next to them county. Those 3 are out, and then the uppermost part of East Tennessee.
Okay.
But all the way from Morgan, Fentress, Pickett, Clay, Macon, Robertson, Sumner, all of those are now under.
Okay.
And Kentucky's going to have to decide. Kentucky has some fire ants.
They've got them. They just don't want to admit it.
That's correct.
Nobody wants to admit they've got fire ants.
Nobody.
I can't remember. I had another guest in, and I can remember when I used to look at that map. There are like 2 counties down in south central or southwestern Texas that they're the only places in the entire state of Texas on the fire ant map that has no fire ants, which is literally impossible unless the entire county is concrete. And how or why they do that on the map, I don't know.
But Kentucky's going to have to make a decision to what they're going to do next. They don't have as many inspectors as we do. Mm-hmm. They would run everything through the university system, which...
Now, is that because they don't have as big a nursery industry as Tennessee does? Or
I think so, but I've never really heard them give their explanations. Mm-hmm. And again, I think putting it in the university system, it's kind of like it's extension at that point.
Right.
Where we're very different from extension. We have extension separate from us, mm-hmm. although we overlap a lot in many cases, but...
Now, do other states around us, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, North Carolina, they all have nursery industry. Do they have a separate nursery arm of their State Department of Agriculture, or do you know?
They do. Most all the other southern states are similar to us in that they have a set of inspectors who do a lot of the similar things that we do, mm-hmm. and they work with. I don't know if any of them are the inspectors are considered extension, but we know that they have a very similar structure to ours. Kentucky's the only one that I know is kind of a little bit different in a southern state group. Mm-hmm. Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. Florida has a humongous plant industry.
Oh, yeah.
Business and down there, and so they have tons of inspectors down there. Mm-hmm. And they have a lot of USDA inspectors too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what would a USDA inspector inspect as opposed to a state Department of Agriculture inspector?
So in Tennessee, the nurserymen will love to hear this. The USDA inspectors do not do any nursery stock in Tennessee.
Okay.
I think they don't feel comfortable, and so it's always been in our wheelhouse, and I think they are very happy to give it to us and leave it there.
Okay.
It's funny, we're trained the same as them to write photos, and when you talk to people in California, they say, well, are you USDA? And we say, no, we're the state of Tennessee, but we have the same training. They kind of, I think, look at us a little skeptical. Yeah. But we do. We have the same testing, training, the whole 9 yards. USDA will handle other things that we don't. You'll recall, I think last year or the year before, they had seeds coming through the mail from China. Random seeds, people weren't ordering them.
Yeah, I do kind of remember that.
And they thought it was some kind of a breach of some type or some kind of a... USDA actually collected a lot of those. And so we didn't bother with that, but they did. They'll even inspect certified trash at the airports.
Really?
In Memphis, they'll look at plant material that's coming in from at the big FedEx hub in Memphis.
Right.
They'll actually go there and inspect plants that are coming into the state.
Okay.
So we don't do that.
Okay.
We don't inspect the incoming. Now, we can look at anything the nurserymen want us to, and we can write a report at any time or reject something. But typically we don't go to the airports and look at that.
Now, in the past, years ago, I used to import a lot of daylilies and hostas out of Costa Rica. And we're going to have to break for a commercial right now, and we'll talk more about the import of foreign plants when we get back. This is Tim Hitchcock back with Tracy Puckett from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. We were just talking before the break about plants being imported into the state of Tennessee. Now, I used to get a lot of plant material out of Costa Rica. I actually had a gentleman down there that was custom growing daylilies and hostas for me. And that would all come through Miami, and I suppose it was probably inspected by USDA in Miami, because when I would come up to air cargo at the Nashville airport, we just loaded it straight onto the truck. Is that probably the case?
Yes, there's going to be USDA inspectors in Miami, and in Miami, Atlanta, there's probably an airport, maybe Dallas in Texas. They have what they call identifier positions. We hired a guy several years ago, Josh Basham, right here out of Warren County, Tennessee. He is a triplet.
Okay.
But we won't hold that against him. But anyway, he went on to make a USDA identifier position, as in he is in Laredo, Texas, at the border.
Oh, really?
He is.
Oh, that's neat.
And so as plant material and stuff comes in, the inspectors are looking at that. Any insects, anything that they find will go to someone like him to be identified. And if there's a problem, that's where they're going to, try to stop it. But you've got so much material coming into the United States, it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And they're not looking at every single plant. They're just not.
Now, getting back to a few years ago when these seeds were coming in from China, did you ever hear what that was all about or anything?
No, but I think there was no threat from it. So that's what they were looking for, just to see. And they weren't invasive plants.
Okay.
So I think, but they did collect the seeds.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, kudzu and Johnson grass, those were brought into the United States from Africa, I believe. And, kudzu's the vine that ate the South.
Yep.
I remember reading in a farm magazine a few years ago about a train spur, and they took like a half dozen cars and put them off on the spur. And after about 6 weeks, they needed to move them. This was down in Georgia, and the kudzu had grown around the wheels and the axles, and in 6 weeks, to the point where the locomotive could not break them free. They had to get in there while the locomotive is trying to pull with machetes and cut the kudzu vines to get them free.
That's crazy.
So, really, if somebody wanted to be a eco-terrorist, they could, if the right bug or plant got started that's hard to eradicate, that's something that could really do a lot of damage.
Especially for us here. Yep.
So now let's get back to what are some of the other things that you do specifically?
Well, some of the things that we also do that you all may not know, we work with certain lumber mills that USDA does not cover, we also cover. And we write phytos for them.
Because a lot of the lumber is exported.
And you would not believe the list of countries that Tennessee lumber is now going into. Spain, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, Turkey. Turkey is one of the hardest countries in the world to get products into.
Really?
Yes.
So they just gobble up our lumber, get it? Tracy?
Yeah,
gobble
turkey,
it,
yes.
Turkey, okay.
Tim is always great for one-liners. So we write phytos for all that. We also look at other products like staves to make whiskey barrels out of.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot for that. We have a seed company up in Cookeville, Tennessee, that ships seeds for human consumption all over the world. It's a great company up there.
I got to tell you this one, talking about seed for human consumption. We had somebody off of our website, and they bought 50 tulips, and they gave us a 1-star review because they said that when they fried them up, they were mushy, they had a bitter flavor, and they would never recommend our tulips to anybody else. Who tries to fry and cook a tulip?
I don't even have an answer for that.
But anyway, tell us more about the seed company.
So they bring in seeds from all over the United States, but all over the world. They get them into their warehouse in Cookeville. They have a cold storage unit, humongous cold storage unit. They actually started out as a sprouting company.
Okay.
And they still have that as a division of their company. But then the seeds, 50-pound bags of seeds at a time on pallets, gets picked up, packaged, and sent to Japan, South Africa, China, Australia. Australia is a very hard country to get products into as well.
So for human consumption, alfalfa sprouts, seeds?
Yes, mung bean, alfalfa, broccoli, radish, onion, cabbage, radishes. There's several different kinds of radishes, a bunch of different cabbages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have that. We have that seed company, and we get the occasional. We do tobacco phytos in East Tennessee sometimes. We will do other seeds that are going to Haiti.
Let's drop back to tobacco for a minute. You said you were raised on a tobacco farm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can remember when I was growing up, just about everybody had a small tobacco base.
Yes.
And they would produce a little bit of tobacco. My friends would earn money picking some kind of worm.
Tobacco worms.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That makes sense. Tobacco worm.
Tobacco worms, about 2 inches long.
But they could do a lot of damage. They get a penny apiece for picking tobacco worms off of tobacco. How big of an industry is tobacco now in the state of Tennessee?
It's not. It's shrunk down so much when the base was shrunk.
Mm-hmm.
And the...
Can you explain base? Because people don't
I'm not
realize
sure
what
if
that
I
is.
So you have a certain allotment that you can grow without having to rent other people's base allotments per your farm. And so it's based on, I think, your acreage.
When we bought our current farm, we had a tobacco base on it because somebody in the past, when they established these bases, they were growing tobacco, and we never grew tobacco, but we would rent the
base
out to somebody to use each year. And finally, we just sold the base at one point in time.
So my father would rent so many people's bases, and we'd grow so many acres of tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just our family that was just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was burley tobacco, which could get, depending on the year and the season to grow, it could get 8-10 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
Heavy.
Yeah.
And now the tobacco's more like it's a it's a darker leaf type of tobacco, and it doesn't get very much over waist high.
Okay.
But a lot of the tobacco grown now is in H2A.
Okay.
And it's being sold directly to the companies that are processing it.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think the tobacco that we write phytos for in East Tennessee is going to like a really odd country. It's not Turkey, but it's in that region right there.
I have heard that there's a lot of that Malaysia and Indonesia, that they import a lot of tobacco.
They might. But that's not the country. I can't remember off the top of my head where it's going. But we also do a lot of stuff to Canada. We do lumber to Canada. We do B&B material. We'll do live steaks. We'll do bare root material to Canada. Bare root plants that the nurserymen here grow.
Right.
Canada's our biggest country as far as exports go. Even with lumber, it's our biggest country.
Okay. Well, let's kind of wind that up and take another commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the TAEP program some. So we'll be back. This is Tim Hitchcock with Hey Hey Hitchcock, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. We're back. This is Tim Hitchcock with Hey Hey Hitchcock, here with Tracy Puckett from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. And Tracy, I forgot to mention earlier that I had a traumatic experience this morning. I was driving through the backside of the farm there on Mud Creek Road, and I witnessed an actual murder.
Really?
Yeah. There were a dozen crows over on the side of the road. A group of crows is called a murder of crows.
Oh.
Thought about calling 911 and telling them, but I don't think they would have thought that was very funny. But anyway, we're going to talk now with Tracy about TAEP, Tennessee Agricultural Enhancement Program, and she has some other things that she will talk to us about, explaining different grants and different funding that people may qualify for in the agricultural industry. Tracy, take it away.
So the Tennessee Agriculture Enterprise Program.
Enterprise. I say enhancement. Enterprise.
Maybe enhancement. I just say TAEP.
I do too.
Yeah, because I don't keep it all by its name. It has 2 or 3 different sections. It started out as mostly beef cattle, right? That's kind of that's how it started 20-something years ago. So the Tennessee Department of Ag takes money in from the sale of tobacco products across the state, and those tax dollars that are taxed on cigarettes and things like that go directly into this agriculture enterprise, this agriculture fund.
Okay.
And so those are the monies that get distributed out through this grant program. And Producer A is all about cattle, genetics, hay equipment, buying bulls, buying heifers, putting a cover over a working, your cattle chute. And that was a really big part of the funding. And then they kind of got complaints that they weren't doing anything for producers who are diversifying or had other things besides cattle. And so that's where our nursery production guys fall in, Producer B, honeybees, agritourism, goats, sheep. I think that the Producer C is all about chickens and poultry and maybe dairy. I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, so they've got these 3 distinctive groups of people that they're giving grant money to based on projects that you want to do.
But there are subgroups within, like you said, B, was nursery, and you also mentioned bees and goats.
That's
and,
correct.
you
So,
know, so
apiary's in there. Nursery is in there. Agritourism is in there. So the department is trying to give people funds and monies to expand their businesses, to grow them, to help them become better producers for agriculture in Tennessee. That's the whole purpose of the program.
So is this grant, is this just you say, hey, I'd like X amount of dollars, and they just write you a check? Is that how it works?
Well, for the cattlemen, you have to have at least 30 head of cattle.
Okay.
You have to take the master beef producer class.
So there are minimum requirements.
There are minimum requirements.
And
That's correct.
educational requirements and
Yes,
experience.
for all of them.
Okay.
Yes. For producer B, the requirement is a master farm manager class, and there's one going on in McMinnville right now.
Is that at the extension service, or would that be at
So the education comes through extension.
Okay.
That's where we partner with extension to try and do this. There's also online classes that you can take, and there's a master nursery class online that you can take as well. So you have to have the education class in order to get the reimbursement now.
Okay.
They used to do a 50%, 35% kind of qualification. That no longer exists. So if you made an application back last October, and you have applied and you're doing something with nursery, in order for you to get that money, you have to take the class and have finished that class, the education part of it. For somebody who's moving in here for the first time from another state,
I've got an example. I've got
Go ahead.
some friends, a young couple. He's in IT and she is an accountant, and they're both able to work remotely. And they have been talking to me about putting up a greenhouse. They bought a place in town, but there's quite a bit of land with this place, and they've talked about putting in a greenhouse and growing vegetables. Now, can they qualify for that?
if they meet the minimum requirements and if they are licensed with our department, there's other sections that also have licensing requirements.
Okay.
But like for beef cattle, they'd have to have, 30 head. For nursery, they would have to have a license with our department.
Okay.
They'd have to have a greenhouse license and be inspected. But yes, they could make an application if they met those minimum requirements.
And again, you talked reimbursement. The state doesn't send, Joe Blow a check to do this. Joe Blow has to spend the money.
That's correct.
And meet the qualifications and fill out the paperwork. And at that point, he gets reimbursed by the state.
That's correct. You have to turn in, besides the application, you're turning in, you'd want to get an initial estimate if you're doing a huge project. Mm-hmm. But you have to get, if you're buying a piece of equipment, you have to get the bill of, the bill of sale. You have to take pictures of that equipment. You have to show that you've built the cover or built the extension to the greenhouse. So you have to prove that you're doing the project.
Right.
This is just a portion of the money that you intend to spend already on a project.
Okay, so the state's not going to come in and set you up in business.
No.
They're going to give you a 20, 30% reimbursement on what you have spent if you meet all the qualifications, both educational, by purchasing the equipment and everything beforehand.
And with all of the TAEP, applications that are for the nursery, we always check them against to make sure they have a license with the state.
Okay.
So some type of license, landscaper, plant dealer, nursery, or greenhouse.
So a person puts in an application, they have no license on anything with the state, they're automatically kicked out. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're going to not be considered unless.
Does the state say, hey, unfortunately, you don't have a license, you're not certified, get that, and next year that,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They'll actually, usually I get contacted and say, hey, do you know who this is? Because a lot of those are in Morgan County here. And I'll say no, but I'll check into it, and then I usually talk to the person and explain what they need, because they usually apply again. Yeah.
From personal experience, I've taken advantage of it every year. And I always ask for more than I know that I will get.
Yes.
Because, what they have approved one year, the next year they might not approve.
That's correct.
So, I always, if I need more of something I've already got, I will put that on the application, but then I'll put other things on the application as well.
Yeah. There's also another grant fund opportunity that I want to talk about. It's called the Agriculture Enterprise Fund, and AEF. And it is for people, for agriculture producers. And the education part is not required for this one.
Okay.
But you can definitely.
That's good for me because I don't have much education.
So this one is for people who are doing a lot bigger projects.
Okay.
You're putting in $150,000 expansion to your greenhouses.
Okay.
You're replacing cold storage or building a new cold storage barn.
Right.
You're buying a sod farm might want to buy a new piece of equipment to cut wider strips of sod.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot more money. So if you are thinking to doing a project already, you're saying, well, we've got to do this.
Right.
You definitely need to make the application. TAEP is once a year. It is always the first week in October.
Mm-hmm.
AEF is 4 times a year. It's quarterly.
Okay.
So it has a lot more money behind it. You can get, the minimum is a $50,000 project.
Okay.
Is what you got to be doing, up to $1 million project.
Wow.
Yes, and you could get funded up to 25% of that project.
Now, you said it's quarterly. Can you apply for it if you get it in the first quarter? Can you apply again in the second quarter, and the third, and the fourth?
I think for that project, it's a one-time apply. But
Okay.
if I didn't get it the first time, and I was still going to do the project for some reason, I would apply for it again for sure. The next application for AEF is April the 10th.
Okay.
And then the next one will be July the 10th, so you can see kind of the intervals there.
So what about if somebody applied in January or whenever it was, and they got the funding for that specific project, and another project comes along for whatever reason later in the year?
I would apply.
I
would apply.
mean, all they can do is turn you down.
That's correct.
They're not going to slit your wrist and throw you off the Rock Island Dam for applying an extra time.
And there is a very small core group of people, along with the Commissioner of Agriculture, who's selecting those AEF grants because it's a lot more money.
Okay.
And so, again, what they're looking for is that you are increasing the markets to where you can sell products.
Mm-hmm.
You're increasing your innovation.
Mm-hmm.
You are changing or affecting the community where your business is located.
Mm-hmm. So I know that certain, and I don't know how they determine it, but some areas of the state and even different areas within a county will be considered, I can't remember the right terminology.
Distressed.
Distressed. So if a person is trying to affect one of these projects in a area that is considered distressed, he probably has a better chance of getting that project approved than someone trying to do the same thing in an area that is not considered distressed.
That's correct. And I can't remember the 7 or 9 distressed counties off the top of my head. It seems like Morgan is one of them, maybe Clay.
Mm-hmm.
There's some in East and there's some in West.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that Grundy is one of those.
Okay.
I don't think. I could be wrong about that. But yes, if they were applying in one of those counties, they're going to get a little bit more consideration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Tracy, we're going to have you back. They're showing me that we need to wind this up, and there's some other things that we wanted to talk about, but it's been a pleasure having you here today with us. And hopefully you can get approval and maybe come back and visit us again.
Sounds great.
This is Tim Hitchcock with Hey Hitchcock, and our guest this week was Tracy Puckett with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. And just telling you guys again, we'll talk about agriculture, we'll talk about horticulture, we'll talk about floriculture, and maybe even aquaculture. But that's as close as you're going to get me to any kind of culture. We'll see you next week.